Well, it is right at 11, so we'll kind of go ahead and get started and we'll let anybody else join as they come in. But today's webinar is just going to be on protecting your personal assets and learning a little bit more about piercing the corporate veil. This is something all business owners, corporations, LLCs, everyone needs to be aware of when you're running a business to make sure you're properly running it so you don't have your personal assets garnished in any lawsuits. So we're going to go into a little detail about that today. The first thing I always like to do is introduce you to me. A little bit about me. I'm a graduate of the University of South Carolina with a degree in biology chemistry, cognate chemistry, full degree in biology. My main practice areas are estate planning, elder law, Medicaid planning, and business planning. So this is one of my main areas of practice that I want to share with everyone, just some information on this piercing the corporate veil. So what we're going to talk about today is how do I protect my personal assets, such as incorporation as an LLC or corporation, properly managing your business, and making sure your business is following all the legal obligations. So that's where we're going to start today and discuss the piercing the corporate veil. So the first thing we need to know is, what does incorporating mean? And that's when we register with the Secretary of State, the South Carolina Secretary of State, and we decide whether we're going to be an LLC, a limited liability company, or we're going to be a corporation, and that could be a C Corp or a statutory closed corporation. But either way, you're incorporating, so your business is a separate entity from yourself. So that's going to help you with those protections for piercing the corporate, for making sure that your personal assets are not going to be garnished if you were sued. So that's step one. You have to incorporate your business. That is not being a sole proprietorship. So when you're a sole proprietorship, the business is you and you have not incorporated. You have to actually incorporate it, and you want to go and get your tax ID number for your business and set up all your bank accounts for your business. You want that business to be a separate person. But don't just assume because you've incorporated into an LLC or corporation, you have automatic protection. You only have protection when you actually follow the rules and the formalities of the corporation, that you are in legal compliance to what you have to do to be a corporation. So incorporating is one step, but it is not the total package. You have more work to do than just incorporating. So in simple, we want to know, what is piercing the corporate veil? We hear this talked about a lot. It's something attorneys warn people, you don't want to pierce the corporate veil or you're going to lose those protections. So basically, piercing the corporate veil, in just simple terms, means that your corporation has done something improper and the business creditor can go after your personal assets, not just business assets. So the court disregards your business entity. You are losing the reason why you incorporated. The reason we all incorporate, for the most part, is because you want your personal assets, like your home and your personal bank accounts, to be protected. So that's why you incorporate. So you want this business to be thought of separately, and you don't want the courts to be able to pierce this corporate veil. So when they pierce this corporate veil, that means that they could go after your personal assets if they found that they have a reason to pierce. So we're going to get a little bit more into that. But basically, you don't want this to happen. You want to follow those business formalities because you don't want your personal assets to be hurt. So some common ways we have veil piercing. So commingling assets. That means you put your business assets and your personal assets all in the one bank account. So if you have a bank account and you put your own money in there, and then you're putting your business money in there, and you don't have two separate bank accounts. They're maybe under your social security number, or maybe they're under the business social security number, but you're paying your personal mortgage out of this. Those are things that you're not supposed to do as a business. A business is a third party. So you're not supposed to pay from the business your personal mortgage. You can still pay yourself a salary, or you can work out with your accountant how you're going to get paid, but you would then pay yourself, and then yourself pays your mortgage. This business does not pay your mortgage. Failure to present your business as an incorporated entity. So this means doing things like when you sign a contract, you sign in your personal name and not your business name. On your business card, say you're the John Doe LLC, and you just put John Doe. You don't put John Doe LLC. You're not letting people know you're an incorporated entity. So that's the bad thing to do. You want to put that LLC or that Inc. out there so that way people know this isn't you. This is an incorporated entity. You need to keep business records. You want to keep your accounting records. You want to make sure you have records of business meetings, special meetings, all of those type things. You want to have those happen so that way you are protected. We have a question real quick. So one person asked, if you get sued and you've been paying your mortgage with business checking money, could they take your house? So there's kind of what you're going to have to do is actually prove, the court's going to have to, and we'll go over this a little bit more as we go, but the court would have to prove that you pierced the corporate veil. And then they could look at your personal assets to be able to pay this debt, but typically they're not going to come take your house. There are some exceptions in debt collections, so that would be something that we would look at there. But it is important because no matter what, you don't want to lien on any of your personal property, and you want to make sure you're following these rules to make sure you don't even have to worry about this. Undercapitalization is a big thing that a lot of companies do, where they take all their money out of the business and there's nothing in there, which we're not saying keep a lot of money in your business, but you want to have enough that the business could continue to run for so much time. And that'd be something you want to discuss with your accountant and your attorney to make sure your business is properly capitalized. But the reason they're saying this is because people will move all their money out of the business so the creditors won't have anything to go after. Failure to properly sign documents. So this means with failure to properly sign documents, so you want to make sure it is, you sign as John Doe member, John Doe LLC, John Doe shareholder or president of your company. You don't want to sign as an individual. You want to make sure you're always signing on behalf of your corporation. So that's really important, is to make sure you always sign properly. If you don't, that could look like you're signing as yourself. I think the biggest thing with this is we want to make sure that we treat this business as a separate entity. You don't want people to think of this business as you. You want them to think of a separate entity. You also want to make sure you always treat this business how you would treat another person. So like, you're not going to give another person a loan without having it in writing. Simple things like that people kind of forget to do just because we think of this business as ourselves, maybe because we're the sole member, we're the sole shareholder, but we always have to think of it as a third party. That's really the biggest thing you need to always think with the business. This business isn't me, this business is a third party. So a little bit about the actual process of proving the piercing the corporate veil. So it's just not automatically going to happen. Somebody's going to sue you, and then they're going to say, this business doesn't have the deep pockets to pay this debt. I want to see about this individual to make sure I get my debt paid back, or whatever it is. Maybe you were sued because you're McDonald's and somebody, spilled hot coffee on their lap, things like that. Whatever reason it is, they're gonna have to prove that they can pierce the corporate veil. So the opposing party, the one wanting to do this, has the burden to prove it. And like we talked about before, the court is going to look at these factors. They're going to look at the undercapitalization. They're going to look at disregard for a corporate entity. They're going to look to see if there's fraud. If there is any type of fraud, that is a big deal. That is a big no-no. So we don't want to have that. So make sure when you have fraud, that is the biggest deal of all. So make sure you're doing everything properly. Fraud would be, one person did ask, what do you mean by fraud? So say you knew you had a debtor and you intentionally moved money to avoid paying this creditor. That's fraud. You do things that aren't legal or that are maybe unethical, but it's something you do to avoid paying this debt. So maybe you sold your house knowing you had this lien on it, and you didn't do it properly, but you sold this piece of property so that way they couldn't put a lien on it. Things like that are looked at as fraud. So that's when we can pierce the corporate veil. And fraud in the civil sense isn't the same as the criminal sense. There's two different ways to look at fraud. So that's something we have to consider too. And I think always making sure you have an accountant, an attorney, financial advisors, everybody looking over your stuff to make sure you're doing everything properly helps with that too. Another thing the courts look at is not keeping corporate records. So you want to have minutes of your meetings. You want to treat this corporation like it's a different person, like I said. So you have a meeting, you're going to need to take minutes, whether it's just you because you're the sole shareholder, you still need to take minutes like you would at any other setting. That's really important. You want to make sure you're balancing your books, doing your payroll properly, all of that type stuff. You don't want to be messing up on any of the accountings or corporate formalities there. And officers and directors not properly functioning. So those are things that we look at with piercing the corporate veil that the court's going to look at and to establish whether the opposing party has the right to pierce the corporate veil to look at your personal assets. So some ways to avoiding is kind of what we've been talking about the whole time. You want to keep business and personal finances separate. Business expenses can be paid by the business account. You don't want to pay other things from the business account except business expenses. So your cell phone bill, if that's used for your business, that's fine. But if it's your personal cell phone, you're going to have to look at, am I using this for business or am I using this for personal? With vehicles, those type things, they need to be used for the business, not your personal assets being called as business assets. So that's something you want to always talk to your accountant about, is making sure that you're taking off the proper business expenses. But one thing's for sure, you don't want to pay your bills that 100% are yours from this company's account. So talk to your accountant about legit business expenses, but anything else, don't pay your home mortgage, don't pay your grocery bill. All that stuff needs to be separated and you pay that personally. Like we talked about before, properly signing your name on all business documents. So if you're signing a contract, you never just want to sign it John Doe, because at that point, it looks like you're signing individually and you're not signing on behalf of this company. And once again, that's not what you want to have happen, because you're pretty much saying, hey, I'm liable for this because I'm signing by myself. You're not saying I'm signing on behalf of the company. So when you go to sign a contract or when you're signing any document on behalf of the company, you need to put out there what your role is with the company. So if you're an LLC, you put member, or if you're a manager managed LLC, you put manager. So you put your role in as the company. So it's always John Doe member, John Doe LLC. Say you're a corporation and you're the secretary of it. John Doe secretary, John Doe Incorporated. So it's really important to make sure when you're signing anything, you do this way, so there's no issues that you're signing individually. And when you're marketing and branding, you need to hold yourself out as an LLC or incorporated. You don't want to hold yourself out as just John Doe. You want on your business cards to have John Doe LLC. And if you're going to put like a title in sense of owner or something, you want to make sure instead of owner, you put member. If you're a corporation, you want to put president or secretary. I mean, it's okay if, like, for me on my business card, I put attorney because that is what I am. So you can still put what you're doing, but if you're putting yourself out as owner, you want to make sure you put it properly with member instead of owner, or secretary instead of shareholder. Those are just little things that always need to be thought of when you're promoting your company. Some more tips, you want to maintain those corporate records. Make sure you have your proper accounting records, proper payroll, proper everything with corporate records. And this is where sometimes you may need the accountant to help you out or have somebody that helps you out with payroll. Make sure you're paying the taxes properly if you have employees. Make sure you're doing the proper record keeping for them. You need to hold shareholder meetings for corporations and keep minutes of this meeting. So every year you need to have an annual meeting. And whether you're the sole shareholder or there's multiples, you still need to have this annual meeting and take minutes from the meeting where you're going to reelect yourself as president or secretary if it's just you, but you want to have this meeting because that's part of the formalities of being a corporation. You need to hold special meetings when you're doing something outside the scope of normal business. So if you're borrowing money over a set amount, you need to have a special meeting so the corporation can approve it. Same thing if you're buying real estate, selling real estate, if you're giving a loan, if your corporation is loaning somebody money, you always want to make sure you have that special meeting. You want to keep enough capital in your business account so it isn't considered undercapitalized. I mean, you may want to think, I always need to have a month's operational expenses, maybe 2 months. I think that's a conversation you need to have with an accountant and an attorney to kind of determine what's right for your business to make sure we don't look at it being undercapitalized. We want to have proper documentation for if we do loans. So if you're loaning somebody money from the business, you want to have that promissory note. You want to have, if you're loaning for a piece of property, you want to have that mortgage on there. And vice versa, if you are taking out a loan, you want to make sure everything's properly done. And on the same point, if you are giving a loan from you personally to your company, not a capital contribution, but a loan you expect to get paid back, you want to have that promissory note and you're going to put in the terms of it of the loan. So those are all things you need to look at to make sure you avoid piercing the corporate veil. Remember, this business is a separate entity from yourself. So that's kind of the key thing to always remember is I'm not doing business with myself, but this is a third party. And how would I treat another person? And that's how I need to think of my business. So we do this on a lot of our business webinars is we kind of have some just tips for business owners. And I want to give you those as well in case you've never tuned into one of our webinars before. So as a business owner, you want to have on your invoices the due dates, and you want to have interest on late payments, and you want to have a clause for collections and attorney's fees. Because if somebody doesn't pay your invoice and you don't have a due date, it's up to the court to decide what's reasonable. And for you, reasonable could be a week. To the court, reasonable could be 6 months. So you need to put that in there so there is a due date. You also want to have interest. If you don't have interest on your invoice, the court isn't going to give you interest. Same with the collection and attorney's fees. We want to always be cautious of personal guarantees. When you sign a personal guarantee, that means you are responsible for the loan. So that means if your company goes out of business, it doesn't matter. You are still on the hook for this. So it does kind of avoid what you set the LLC or corporation up for because you are responsible for the debts. But at the same point, if you're a new business and you're looking to start and you need funding from a bank, they're going to need to know that somebody's on the hook to pay this money back. So we are cautious of personal guarantees. You really want to, if you have to sign one, you want to really thoroughly review it, make sure it's limited in time and scope, and you want to make sure that you understand what you're taking on when you sign a personal guarantee. Well, we've talked about before, we tell all of our business owners, make sure you sign documents to reflect your position as officer or member. You want to review all contracts carefully before you sign. Whatever's in the contract is what's going to go. It's not what we talked about. Oh, well, he told me this or she said this. What's in the contract is what's going to hold up in court. So we need to always make sure we review those contracts carefully. What you want in them is actually there and everything is in writing. You want to follow all corporate formalities like we've talked about so you can avoid piercing that corporate veil. I think it's also important to have the proper team to help you succeed. That could include accountants, bookkeepers, payroll, financial advisors, an insurance team, attorneys. So a lot of times we start a business and we're not sure who all we need to contact. And I think that's kind of a good list of people that you may or may not need. It's kind of each situation is different, but having those proper team to help you to make sure that you're on point is always a good thing to have. So a lot of people ask, when do I need to have an attorney? So in South Carolina, technically you can file an LLC without an attorney. If you're filing for a corporation, an attorney actually has to sign that off on that for you. But I think it's always a good idea to make sure, if you're having contracts or if you're not sure if you're doing everything properly, to have a consult with an attorney to make sure you're doing everything legally proper that you need to do, or that you're signing this new lease agreement and you want to make sure that you're doing that what's in the lease agreement is what you're understanding from the landlord. Anytime you're dealing with contracts, it's a good time to have somebody just review it. I also want to point out, if you are sued as the business, you're going to need to hire an attorney to represent the business. So that's something, if you're sued and you're sued from the business and the individual, you're going to want to hire somebody to represent that business, an attorney to do that for you. That's the big time you're going to want to have an attorney on your side. But it's never a bad idea to check in with the right people, such as attorneys and accountants, and making sure that your financial advisors know what you're doing to help you with your finances. It's always a team of people that help a business um, succeed and make sure a business is properly doing everything. So it's always important to have those team of professionals to help you. So that's kind of our presentation for today. Here's my contact information. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them now, or feel free to shoot me an email with any questions. Or if you're looking to schedule any type of meeting with me, feel free to shoot an email. But I'm happy to answer any questions now. Or if we don't have any, it was great to have you all a part of this. It has been recorded, and we'll get this sent out to all our people registered for it. And it's also going to be on my YouTube channel. So feel free to check it out later or tell anybody you think it might benefit. But as I'm not seeing any questions come in, just one more time, if anybody has any, feel free to shoot me a private message, and I'll be happy to answer those for you, or try to. And I look forward to hearing from anybody. But thank you all for attending today, and we'll probably have another webinar coming out soon, so be on the lookout for that.